The first time Marcus Chen noticed something was wrong was on a Tuesday in October, when the rain turned the streets of Arlington into dark mirrors reflecting the streetlights. He was driving his 1982 Honda Civic through the residential streets, two lukewarm pizzas on the back seat, when he realized that apartment 4B of the Meadowbrook complex had placed its 10th order in 3 weeks. Always the same time, between 10:30 and 11:15 p.m. Always the exact amount in cash, never a tip. Marcus had been working for Domino's Pizza for 18 months, long enough to know the patterns of his regulars. He knew Mrs. Rodriguez on Oak Street ordered pepperoni every Friday at 7 p.m. He knew the college kid who always ordered a large pizza with extra cheese on game day Sundays. But apartment 4B was different. There was no pattern to the toppings, no casual chatter at the door, no familiar faces. That specific night, Marcus climbed the exterior stairs of the Meadowbrook complex carrying a margarita and a pepperoni pizza. The fourth-floor hallway smelled of disinfectant and stale cigarette smoke. When he rang the bell for 4B, he waited the usual 15 seconds before the door opened a crack. A woman in her 40s with brown hair tied in a low bun took the pizzas without making eye contact. She wore gold-rimmed glasses and a beige sweater that looked too expensive for someone living in this complex. $26.75, Marcus said, following protocol. The woman handed him exactly $27, 3 $5 bills, 2 ones, and 5 quarters. Marcus had never seen anyone have the exact change with such precision so many times in a row. As she closed the door, he heard muffled voices coming from inside the apartment. At least 3 people, maybe 4. One of the voices had an accent he couldn't place. Walking back down the stairs, Marcus paused on the 2nd floor when he saw a middle-aged man walking quickly through the parking lot. The man was carrying a brown leather briefcase and constantly looking over his shoulder. He wore a dark overcoat, out of place for the October weather, and moved with the urgency of someone late for something important. Marcus watched him get into a gray Buick sedan and drive off without turning on his headlights until he reached the main street. On the way back to the pizzeria, Marcus couldn't get the mathematical precision of the payment and the nervous behavior of the man in the parking lot out of his mind. Working night deliveries for over a year, he had developed a 6th sense for situations that didn't feel right. Drug dealers were obvious. Too much paranoia, not enough organization. Extramarital affairs were predictable. Irregular meetups, excessive nervousness. But apartment 4B didn't fit into any familiar category. When he got back to Domino's, Marcus decided to do something he'd never done before. He started taking notes. In a small notebook he kept in the glove compartment, he wrote down the date, time, exact payment amount, and a description of the woman with the gold-rimmed glasses. He didn't know yet that he was documenting the beginning of his own destruction. Over the next 3 weeks, the orders from apartment 4B became a silent obsession for Marcus. He started carrying a small flashlight and would take detailed notes in his car after each delivery. The notebook became a meticulous log. Arrival and departure times, physical descriptions of whoever answered the door, license plates of cars in the parking lot, even the weather conditions each night. The woman with the gold-rimmed glasses, Marcus mentally nicknamed her Exact Change, wasn't the only person who received the pizzas. Sometimes it was a tall man with a gray mustache who spoke English with a slight Eastern European accent. Other times, it was a young man of Asian descent who never made eye contact and always wore baseball caps pulled down low over his face. But they all followed the same protocol. Exact cash, minimal interaction, door closed quickly. Marcus realized the orders always came on Tuesdays and Thursdays, except when there was a full moon, a detail he only noticed after 4 weeks of observation. On full moon nights, the apartment was completely silent. No orders, no lights in the windows, no movement in the parking lot. In the 5th week of November, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of leaving immediately after the delivery, he parked his Civic on a parallel street and walked back to watch the Meadowbrook complex. Hidden behind an abandoned van, he had a clear view of the building's entrance and part of the parking lot. At 11:45 p.m., 15 minutes after his delivery, 3 men left apartment 4B. The first was the man with the gray mustache carrying a metal briefcase. The second Marcus didn't recognize, a short, stocky man in a black overcoat. The third was the young Asian man, but without the cap, revealing a face older than Marcus had imagined, with a visible scar on his forehead. They walked to different cars. The man with the gray mustache got into a navy blue Ford Taurus. The stranger got on a Honda motorcycle that Marcus hadn't seen before. The young Asian man walked to a white Volkswagen Jetta parked at the far end of the complex, but none of them left right away. For 20 minutes, Marcus watched a strange ritual. The three men remained in their respective vehicles with the engines off. At exactly 12:05 a.m., the man with the gray mustache started the Taurus and left the parking lot. 5 minutes later, the man on the motorcycle did the same. The young Asian man waited another 10 minutes before driving off. Marcus wrote everything down. Times, departure sequence, the directions they took. His hand was shaking slightly as he wrote, not from the cold, but from a nervous excitement he couldn't explain. He was documenting something important, something he clearly wasn't supposed to witness. The next morning, during his accounting class at Northern Virginia Community College, Marcus couldn't concentrate. He sketched the faces he had memorized, trying to decipher the pattern behind the meetings. He researched the Meadowbrook complex at the library and discovered that apartment 4B was registered to an Elena Kozlov, an immigrant from Czechoslovakia who had become a naturalized American citizen in 1979. That afternoon, Marcus made the decision that would seal his fate. He called the FBI. The call to the FBI was answered by a receptionist who transferred Marcus to Special Agent David Brennan after he mentioned suspicious activities involving possible espionage. Brennan, a 15-year veteran of the Counterintelligence Division, listened to Marcus's account with an initial skepticism that quickly turned into genuine interest. "You said you've been taking down exact times for almost 2 months?" Brennan asked. "Yes, sir. I have it all here in my notebook. Times, physical descriptions, license plates, behavioral patterns." Marcus flipped through his notes as he spoke. "And there's something else. I found out that Elena Kozlov, the official tenant, works as a freelance translator for the State Department. At least that's what her employment record says." Brennan scheduled a meeting for the next day at a Denny's in Alexandria. Marcus arrived 20 minutes early, chose a booth with a view of the entrance, and ordered only coffee. When Brennan appeared, a man in his late 40s, a discreet gray suit, a posture that screamed federal agent, Marcus felt the true weight of what he was doing for the first time. "Show me your notes," Brennan said without preamble. Marcus opened the notebook. 2 pages had turned into 10, 10 into 20. Brennan examined each entry with growing attention, occasionally asking specific questions about details Marcus had considered irrelevant. "Are you sure about these plates? KGB 4721 on the Ford Taurus?" "Absolutely. I wrote it down 3 different times to be sure." Brennan paused for too long. "Marcus, do you have any idea what you might have stumbled upon here? Soviet espionage. At least that's what I suspect." "You don't suspect. You've documented 23 meetings of a cell we've been investigating for 3 years." Brennan closed the notebook slowly. "Apartment 4B is a meeting point for KGB agents who have been operating on the East Coast since 1983. Elena Kozlov is a Soviet intelligence officer with access to classified documents from the State Department." Marcus felt his stomach sink. "Am I in danger?" "Not yet, but that's going to change quickly." Brennan leaned forward. "I need you to keep making the deliveries as usual. Don't change anything about your behavior. Don't tell anyone about this conversation. We're going to install surveillance equipment in your car, a camera, a microphone, a GPS transmitter." "Surveillance equipment? You've become an American intelligence asset, Marcus. You didn't ask for this, but it's what happened. Now we have 2 options. We use your observations to dismantle this cell, or they find out you're watching them and—" Brennan let the sentence hang in the air. Marcus knew what that hesitation meant. "What if I want to stop? What if I just want to forget all of this?" "It's too late for that. You already know too much. They have procedures for dealing with civilians who know too much." Brennan placed a business card on the table. "This is my direct line. Anything at all that seems different, you call me immediately." That night, Marcus looked at his reflection in the bathroom mirror and saw a stranger. In 2 months, he had gone from a pizza delivery guy to an involuntary spy. His simple life, work, college, a casual relationship with Jennifer from his literature class, had evaporated. Now he was part of something much bigger and infinitely more dangerous than delivering hot food on cold Virginia nights. The surveillance equipment was installed on a Saturday morning in the empty parking lot of a mall in Fairfax. 2 FBI technicians, who introduced themselves only as Mike and Tom, turned Marcus's Honda Civic into a mobile surveillance platform in 45 minutes. A micro camera was installed in the dashboard, disguised as part of the radio. Directional microphones were embedded in the side mirrors. A GPS transmitter, the size of a coin, was fixed under the chassis. The equipment records everything automatically, Mike explained as he tested the systems. You don't have to do anything but drive normally and make your deliveries. We'll be monitoring everything in real time. Marcus was given a modified pager that vibrated with specific codes. One long vibration meant, proceed as normal. 2 short vibrations meant, abort mission and leave the area immediately. 3 long vibrations was the emergency code. Your cover is blown, proceed to the extraction point. On the first Tuesday after the installation, Marcus made his routine delivery to apartment 4B with a new perspective. Every move he made was being recorded, every word documented. The woman with the gold-rimmed glasses, he now knew her name was Elena Kozlov, took the pizzas with the same coldness as always. $28.50, exact change, door closed in 15 seconds. But this time, Marcus noticed details he had missed before. The apartment smelled of chemicals, not household cleaning products, something more specific, almost medicinal. Elena was wearing thin, almost imperceptible rubber gloves. And there was a second set of footprints on the doormat, larger than hers, with a sole pattern Marcus didn't recognize. At 11:52 p.m., Marcus parked in his usual observation spot, now aware that federal agents were monitoring every second of the operation. The nightly ritual began on schedule. The man with the gray mustache, Brennan had identified him as Dmitry Volkov, a cultural attaché at the Soviet embassy, came out carrying not a briefcase, but a large, thick envelope. The young Asian man, whose real name was Kenji Nakamura, an engineer at Lockheed Martin with access to classified military projects, was carrying a leather briefcase identical to the one Marcus had seen weeks before. But tonight, there was a fourth participant. A young woman no older than 25 left the apartment last. Marcus watched her through a pair of binoculars loaned to him by the FBI. Short blonde hair, a black leather jacket, the confident stride of someone used to being in control. She walked to a red Porsche 944 that Marcus had never seen in the parking lot before. The pager vibrated once, proceed as normal. Marcus documented everything verbally, knowing the microphones were picking up every word. 11:54 p.m. Unidentified fourth subject, young female, approximately 5'5", blonde hair, black leather jacket, vehicle, red Porsche 944, license plate. He strained to read, Charlie Delta Romeo 8923. At the FBI's Operations Center in Washington, Agent Brennan watched real-time video feeds while teams of analysts processed every piece of information Marcus provided. The woman in the red Porsche was Katerina Lebedev, a KGB agent they knew was on U.S. soil, but had never been able to locate. Marcus Chen, pizza delivery guy, had just broken a 5-year investigation wide open. The discovery of Katerina Lebedev completely changed the dynamic of the operation. Brennan explained to Marcus during an emergency meeting the next morning that Katerina was considered one of the most dangerous KGB agents operating on American soil. An expert in assassinations that looked like accidents and in extracting information through psychological torture, she had been linked to at least 6 deaths of American double agents in Europe. Her presence here means something big is about to happen, Brennan said, showing Marcus a file photo of Katerina. She doesn't show up for routine meetings. She's only called in for terminal operations. Marcus studied the photo. An attractive woman with Slavic features smiling slightly for the camera. Nothing about her suggested the lethal coldness Brennan described. Terminal operations? Elimination of compromised agents? Or, Brennan paused, elimination of civilians who know too much. The implication hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. Do they know about me? We don't know yet. That's why we're accelerating the operation. We need to document the next meeting and then make the arrests immediately. Marcus received more specific instructions. On the next delivery Thursday, he was to try to prolong his time at the apartment. If Elena asked about a delay, he was to say he was having car trouble. If she offered less change, he was to pretend he didn't have change to accept it. We need recordings from inside the apartment, Brennan explained. Any conversation, even fragments, could give us enough evidence for the arrests. Thursday arrived with a heavy rain that turned the streets into temporary rivers. Marcus drove to the Meadowbrook complex with his nerves on edge. His hands were shaking slightly when he rang the doorbell of apartment 4B at 10:47 p.m. Elena opened the door, but something was different. She studied him for 3 seconds longer than usual. You seem nervous tonight. Car trouble, Marcus said, following the script. I almost didn't make it here. Come in, it's raining hard. Marcus hesitated. In 2 months of deliveries, he had never been invited inside. That's not necessary, ma'am. I just need the payment. I insist. Elena opened the door completely. At least until the rain lets up. Marcus stepped into an apartment that was completely different from what he'd expected. The walls were covered with detailed maps of Washington, D.C. and the surrounding areas, with points marked in red. Several makeshift tables held electronic equipment he didn't recognize. Sophisticated radios, portable computers, what looked like a military fax machine. Dmitry Volkov was sitting in a leather armchair, reading a document in Russian. He looked up as Marcus entered. Our favorite delivery boy. Always so punctual. Marcus forced a smile. I like to keep to a schedule. Yes, we've noticed. Katerina Lebedev emerged from the kitchen, holding a cup of coffee. Even dressed casually, jeans and a sweater, she radiated a dangerous authority. You've been very observant lately. Marcus's pager vibrated twice. Abort mission and leave the area immediately. What's your full name? Katerina asked, approaching slowly. Marcus felt sweat trickling down his back. Marcus Chen. Why? Professional curiosity. Katerina smiled, but her eyes remained as cold as Arctic ice. You see, Marcus Chen, there's a difference between delivering pizzas and delivering information, and we always know when someone is doing both. Marcus realized he had made a fatal mistake. Katerina positioned herself between him and the door, while Dmitry rose from the armchair with deliberate movements. Elena closed the door and turned the deadbolt, a sound that echoed in the apartment like a death sentence. Sit down, Marcus, Katerina said, pointing to a sofa in the center of the room. We're going to have an interesting talk. Marcus obeyed, trying to control his panic. The pager was vibrating insistently in his pocket. 3 long, repeated vibrations, the highest emergency code. Brennan and his team knew something had gone wrong, but Marcus was alone in that apartment with 3 Soviet agents trained to kill. Dmitry, show our young friend what we found, Katerina said. Dmitry opened a folder and spread photographs across the coffee table. They were pictures of Marcus, arriving at the Denny's to meet Brennan, talking in the mall parking lot where they installed the equipment, parked on the parallel street during his nightly vigils. The last photo showed Marcus in profile, clearly taken through the window of apartment 4B. We've known about you for 3 weeks, Elena said, sitting in a nearby chair. Since the second time you stayed to watch after a delivery. Dmitry noticed your silhouette behind the abandoned van. Marcus tried to keep his voice steady. I don't know what you're talking about. Katerina laughed, a sharp sound that held no humor. Marcus, we are professionals. Detecting amateur surveillance is basic training for us. She knelt in front of him, studying his face. The question is, are you a very bad FBI agent or just a stupid civilian who stumbled into something too big for him to understand? I'm just a pizza delivery guy. Who takes detailed notes on our meetings? Who memorizes license plates? Who knows our schedules better than we do? Katerina stood up and walked to one of the tables with the electronic equipment. She picked up a device that looked like a handheld metal detector. This device detects transmitters, microphones, any kind of electronic surveillance equipment. Marcus watched in silent horror as Katerina passed the detector over his body. The device started beeping when it got near his chest, where the modified pager was. It beeped again near his head. The microphones in the glasses Brennan had insisted he wear. Standard issue FBI, Katerina said, examining the pager after removing it from Marcus's pocket. 1987 model, used exclusively by the Counterintelligence Division. She looked at Dmitry and Elena. Our pizza boy is a federal agent. I'm not an agent, Marcus said desperately. They recruited me. I just wanted to do the right thing. The right thing. Dmitry repeated the words with disdain. Do you know how many of our operatives were exposed because of your notes? How many years-long operations have been compromised? Elena checked her wristwatch. Katerina, we need to move. If he has FBI equipment, they know he's here. We'll have company soon. Katerina nodded. Marcus, you've created a very serious problem. Fortunately, we are experts at solving problems. She opened a drawer and pulled out a syringe filled with a clear liquid. This will make it look like a heart attack. Quick, painless, no suspicion. The apartment lights suddenly went out. The darkness lasted only 5 seconds before the apartment windows exploded simultaneously. Flashbang grenades turned the room into an inferno of blinding light and deafening noise. Marcus instinctively threw himself to the floor, covering his ears as glass rained down on him. Shouts in Russian echoed through the apartment. Dmitri tried to reach for a pistol on a nearby table, but a red laser dot appeared on his chest. An amplified voice yelled in English, "FBI on the ground, everybody on the ground now." Federal agents stormed in through the shattered windows, rappelling down from the building's roof. Others blew the front door off its hinges with directed explosive charges. In less than 15 seconds, the apartment was filled with armed men in heavy tactical gear. Katerina reacted with the speed of a professional. Even dazed by the flashbang, she managed to reach a pistol hidden under a sofa cushion. But before she could aim it, a sniper's shot came through the window and hit her hand, sending the gun flying across the room. "Medic! We need a medic in here!" someone shouted. Marcus stayed on the floor, disoriented and bloodied from the glass cuts. Agents surrounded him, but their voices sounded distant and muffled. Someone turned him over and checked for serious injuries. "This is our asset. He's okay. Just superficial cuts." Elena tried to destroy documents on a nearby table, frantically tearing papers. An agent subdued her before she could finish, but she managed to swallow something, probably a cyanide capsule. She began convulsing immediately. "Elena's going into cardiac arrest. We need paramedics now." Dmitri, more pragmatic, surrendered without a fight when 3 agents surrounded him. He raised his hands and knelt slowly. "Dmitri Volkov, cultural attaché of the Soviet embassy. I demand to speak with my consulate." "You'll be speaking with federal prosecutors," an agent replied as he handcuffed him. Brennan appeared in the room, coordinating the operation over his radio. When he saw Marcus sitting on the sofa, being examined by a paramedic, he sighed in visible relief. "How did you know I was in danger?" Marcus asked, still dizzy. "Your mics picked up everything. We heard when Katerina mentioned the syringe." Brennan knelt beside him. "Marcus, do you realize what just happened? This is the most successful counterintelligence operation in 5 years. You helped dismantle a Soviet cell that had been operating for over a decade." Marcus looked around the devastated apartment. Elena was being carried out on a stretcher, still convulsing. Katerina was clutching her wounded hand, being handcuffed by 2 agents. Dmitri was sitting in a chair, answering initial questions from an interrogator. "What happens to me now?" "Now you go into the witness protection program," Brennan said. "Marcus Chen, pizza delivery guy, officially ceases to exist. You'll get a new identity, a new life, a new place to live. It's the price for doing the right thing." Marcus tried to process the information. In 3 months, he had lost his identity, his normal life, his plans for the future, all because he noticed that someone always paid with exact change. What if I don't want a new identity? What if I just want to go back to my normal life? Brennan glanced at Katerina, who was being led out of the apartment. Even injured and in handcuffs, she looked directly at Marcus with an expression that promised revenge. "Marcus," Brennan said softly, "your normal life ended the moment you decided to write down that first license plate. There's no going back." The process of making Marcus Chen disappear began at 4:30 the next morning in a secure FBI facility in Quantico. He was escorted by 2 agents through windowless corridors to a room that looked like a corporate office. A wood desk, padded chairs, fresh coffee on a tray. But the doors had electronic locks and no handles on the inside. "This is Special Agent Sarah Morrison, our coordinator for the Witness Protection Program," Brennan said, introducing a middle-aged woman with a military posture and a direct gaze. Morrison opened a thick folder. "Marcus, I need to explain exactly what's about to happen. Your previous life, your relationships, your job, your plans, all of it ends today. You will receive a complete new identity, birth certificate, educational history, employment records, even a fabricated medical history." Marcus looked out the room's only window at a view of an empty parking lot under security lights. "What about my family, my friends? Jennifer? Jennifer Brooks, your girlfriend from literature class. We spoke with her yesterday. We told her you had to leave for a family emergency and wouldn't be able to contact her for an indefinite period." Morrison flipped through documents as she spoke. "Your parents in San Francisco will receive the same explanation. Eventually, when the dust completely settles, we might be able to arrange limited supervised contact. Maybe." "Marcus, Katerina Lebedev survived the gunshot to her hand. Elena Kozlov survived the suicide attempt but has permanent brain damage that's left her useless for interrogation. Dmitry Volkov is cooperating in exchange for deportation instead of a life sentence. Morrison paused. But there are other Soviet agents we didn't capture. And they all now know that an American civilian named Marcus Chen destroyed a years-long operation. Brennan leaned forward. For the next 6 months you will live in a small town in Oregon. New identity, new job, probably something related to accounting, given your academic background. You'll have regular contact with us, but that support will be gradually reduced until you're completely autonomous. And after that, you try to build a normal life again, under another name, in another place, as another person. Morrison handed a folder to Marcus. These are your new documents. From now on, you are David Williamson, 24 years old, born in Portland, with an accounting degree from Oregon State University. Marcus, now David, examined the documents. Everything looked authentic. Driver's license, social security card, even photos of a family that was supposedly his. How do you guys do this? Decades of practice, Morrison said. During the Cold War, we protected hundreds of Soviet defectors, double agents, informants. You're just one more. Brennan handed him a sealed envelope. This contains $15,000 in cash and detailed instructions for your first few weeks as David Williamson. There's also a 24-hour emergency phone number. In that moment, Marcus fully understood that his decision to write down license plates had cost him more than his safety. It had cost him his very existence. Marcus Chen, the 23-year-old student who delivered pizzas to pay for college, had died in that Arlington apartment, even if his body was still alive. When do I leave? Asked David Williamson. The trip to Oregon took place in an unmarked van with tinted windows. Marcus, who now forced his mind to think as David Williamson, traveled for 2 days with 2 agents who took turns driving and sleeping. They stopped only at isolated gas stations and roadside motels where they paid in cash and asked no questions. Bend, Oregon, was a town of 40,000 people surrounded by pine forests and snow-capped mountains. David was set up in a 1-bedroom apartment in a quiet residential area, furnished with the bare minimum and completely anonymous. His new credentials had already secured him a job at a local accounting firm, Cascade Tax Services, where he would start the following Monday. Remember, Agent Morrison said before she left, your backstory includes 3 years working for an accounting firm in Portland. You moved to Bend because you wanted a slower pace of life. Never mention Virginia, never talk about delivering pizzas, never show any specific knowledge of FBI procedures. For the first few weeks, David followed a strict routine designed to establish normalcy. Work from 8 to 5, grocery shopping on Tuesdays and Saturdays, the gym 3 times a week, always at the same times. He checked out books from the local library and went to a small movie theater downtown. All the activities of a normal person trying to settle into a new community. But the normalcy was a carefully constructed illusion. David constantly checked for signs of surveillance, cars that appeared too often, faces he saw in different places, anything that might suggest he'd been found. He slept with a Glock 19 pistol that Morrison had provided, hidden in a false drawer next to his bed. After 6 weeks, David received his first call from the emergency number Morrison had given him. An unknown female voice said only, "Blue Point confirmed." It meant that Katerina Lebedev had been located in a federal prison in Atlanta, awaiting trial for espionage and attempted murder. The second call came 2 months later. Red Point eliminated. Dmitry Volkov had been found dead in his federal prison cell, an apparent suicide, but likely a hit by other Russian inmates who considered his cooperation a betrayal. David knew that each update reduced the number of people who wanted him dead, but it also eliminated potential witnesses who could confirm his version of events. He was becoming the sole living repository of information about the Arlington operation. During the Oregon winter, David established a limited social routine. He started attending a local Methodist church, not for religion, but because small churches were natural communities where new people were welcomed without too many questions. He met Margaret, a 30-year-old librarian who had recently divorced and was rebuilding her own life. Margaret didn't ask questions about David's vague past in Portland. She was focused on her own future, on starting over after a failed marriage. For David, she represented the possibility of building genuine relationships without revealing lethal secrets. But even in moments of greatest normalcy, watching a movie with Margaret, playing cards at church, preparing tax returns for local clients, David felt the constant weight of his former life. Marcus Chen was dead, but his memories remained alive, creating a constant tension between who he was and who he had to be. The phone call David Williamson dreaded most came on a Tuesday in March, 14 months after his arrival in Oregon. Morrison's voice was tense. Katerina Lebedev escaped during a transfer to federal court. 3 agents dead, 2 wounded. She has access to resources and identities we didn't know existed. David felt the floor disappear from under his feet. Does that mean? It means you need to move, now. Don't go home, don't contact anyone. There's a gray car parked on the south block from your office. Keys are under the front floor mat, instructions in the glove compartment. David hung up the phone and looked through the window of the office where he had worked for over a year. Margaret was supposed to arrive in 2 hours for lunch, a ritual they had established over the past few weeks. He could never explain why he simply vanished from her life without a word. The gray car was a Honda Accord with Oregon plates and a full tank of gas. The instructions directed David to an address in Montana. Another safe life, another identity, another disappearance. This time he would be Thomas Carter, a 26-year-old financial analyst moving to Billings for a professional opportunity. As he drove through the mountain roads connecting Oregon to Montana, David reflected on the true cost of doing the right thing. He had helped capture Soviet spies, protected American secrets, contributed to national security. But the price was his humanity, the ability to form genuine bonds, to build a future, to simply exist as the person he was born to be. Margaret would discover that David Williamson had simply evaporated. There would be no explanation, no goodbye. She would join the growing list of people who had known false versions of Marcus Chen, Jennifer in Virginia, co-workers in Oregon, the congregation of the Methodist Church that had welcomed him like family. In Montana, Thomas Carter settled into an even more isolated routine. Work, home, grocery store, gym. No close relationships, no religious community, no ties that could cause pain when they inevitably had to be cut. The lesson had been learned. The fewer people who knew Thomas Carter, the less pain would be caused when he had to disappear. 2 years later, on an autumn morning in Billings, Thomas read in the newspaper that Katerina Lebedev had been found dead in an FBI operation in Los Angeles. The headline was small, buried on page 7. Former Soviet spy killed in standoff. 3 paragraphs on the end of a woman who had dedicated her life to killing people who knew too much. Thomas should have felt relief, but he only felt a void. Katerina's death meant that Marcus Chen was finally safe, but Marcus Chen no longer existed. All that remained were successive identities, each more superficial than the last, each built on the paranoia that the previous one could be discovered. That afternoon, Thomas called the emergency number 1 last time. Morrison, now retired, answered personally. "The threat is over," she said. "You can keep the Thomas Carter identity permanently, or we can create one last identity. Your final choice. No more changes." Thomas looked out the window of his Billings apartment, watching normal people living normal lives. "I'd like to be Marcus Chen again." "Marcus," Morrison said softly. "You understand that Marcus Chen died in that Arlington apartment? There's no going back to the person you were before." Thomas hung up the phone and understood the final truth. He had delivered more than information to the FBI. He had delivered his soul, one pizza at a time, until there was nothing left of the man who began that journey by noticing strange payment patterns on a rainy Virginia night.